So thank you all for coming this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie Nye, the library director here at Santa Fe Community College, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to Genevieve Betts this evening. Genevieve is a poet and assistant professor here at Santa Fe Community College, and she teaches creative writing in a low residency MFA program that she was just telling me about at Arcadia University. She's published 2 books, An Unwalled City, and her newest title is A New Kind of Tongue, which she'll be reading from this evening. She holds a MFA in creative writing poetry from Arizona State University. And for this evening, we will hold questions until the end, but if something occurs to you during the reading, if you would like to put it in the chat, I will monitor that and present things to Genevieve at the very end. So please help me welcome Genevieve Betts.
Thank you so much, Val. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the SFCC Library for sponsoring this. And of course, thanks to all of you for coming tonight. The poems I'll read are from my newest book. I will Vanna White it for you now. It's called A New Kind of Tongue, and it just came out a little while ago from FlowerSong Press. The poems in this book were partly written in Brooklyn, which is where I lived before Santa Fe, and partly in Santa Fe. So they wrestle with an adaptation of culture, language, place, the kinds of changes that a person has to go through when they move, and the new language that they have to learn in a way when they move to a new place and they enter that new culture. I'm going to start by reading the first 2 poems from the book, and these wrestle with that theme a little bit. New Light. I want to speak the language of crickets and circuits, circus elephants, crushed velvet and poetry and tar pits. My eyes are crammed with skyscrapers. I want to look at every flower's center as the face of God, the mascara black asterisk striking the inside of the tulip cup, the pollen-tipped whiskers of the tiger lily, the iris's beard, purple and unfurling like a bridge's backbend into an island. The poor daffodils spent all spring with their faces in the rain sludge. So did I, for that matter, trying to mumble through my trumpet mouth mudded shut. I will have to speak a new yellow, the saturated canary of the sun, burn a new light in place of the old one. Late summer. For the older mother, love erupts like acid reflux, unfurls a spiral galaxy like the ones in the blind owl's eyes. Summer's nearly over. You can tell because fat sunflowers cast their gaze downward and cicadas drop dead from the sky, litter hot sidewalks after their last buzzy lullaby. Even the children's clothes foretell the season's end. Mud splatters and grass smears and lightning bug entrails. Gunshots are fewer now. We will soon open the windows to autumn coolness, feel it unfold over Brooklyn rooftops. These next few poems deal with parenthood, the joys, if you will, of parenthood, and I do mean that sarcastically, all the fun complications that come with that. It's another major part of this collection, and I wanted to represent the mother figure as realistic and sometimes, as is the case with this next poem, pandemic tinged. Working from home. Not domestic bliss, but the ever-present demand for breakfast. I become Eggland's best bitch, scramble and poach and fry in the kitchen. No amount of coffee is too much. I read Derrida and Rushdie while my 4-year-old composes songs about farts and penises. I refuse to deconstruct his lyrics. I speed read poetry. My 7-year-old opens Derricott's Tender and asks, "What's a clitoris?" He renders me dictionary, mother and anatomy teacher, contextualizer of all adult things. We watch the latest Trump news, and I expect that at any moment, in the midst of my emailing back a student about her manuscript, he'll ask me to define porn star, collusion, and impeachment. Somewhat still pertinent today. Parental concern. When I stare at my two sons building cities out of Legos, or constructing couch forts, or pretending to be kitty cats, I can't help but think of all of the mothers of serial killers saying that they did the very same thing, reared intelligent and kind and compassionate children just to find out they raised mass shooters and stranglers and necrophiliacs. Ted Bundy's mom said that he was the best son in the world, and he murdered young women, later revisiting and playing with their corpses. Sometimes he would take their heads home, keep them in the fridge, apply eyeshadow to decaying eyelids, garish lipstick to lackluster skin. Cleveland's mom called Dylan her sunshine boy. He opened fire and massacred a bunch of other parents' children. I imagine this is different than being one of those parents that sees years of evidence, kids lighting ants on fire, killing the neighbor's cat, torturing and injuring younger siblings. I am looking for signs, clues of any evil in my babies. I am looking in their corneas for any telltale wasp flickering. I am keeping an eye out for dead kittens in the gladiolas. Sorry, just gonna let some people in here. All right, this next one's title makes a play on words, on the words from Dr. Seuss's poem, "Oh, the Places You'll Go." Oh, the places I've pumped breast milk. Mostly bathrooms. Twice a week in Staten Island ferry restrooms, peeking at spent streetwalkers through the space around the doorway, watching them take off their heels and rub their soles. I tried to minimize the sounds of suction and the hot liquid splatter of blue milk while choppy water bumped my shoulders against the cold metal walls of the stall, hurrying to finish before docking, lest I have to wear my breasts lopsided, one soft and one hard on the train home. In offices and on airplanes and buses. Once I pumped in Edinburgh Castle's bathroom, underground caverns where queens and kings traversed while chained prisoners waned in dungeons and princesses married in the chapel, a tiny single room where stained glass spills multicolored light in geometric patterns. No such thing as breast pumps then, but working wet nurses, rough nipples dipped into the mouths of strange babes. This next poem imagines a mother wilder than myself, but the overall idea still applies. Part-time freedom. After I drop the kids off at school, I get high in the backyard and walk around the kitchen naked. Drive to Tina's shooting range, open fire on silhouettes of paper. Go to Chili's, order never-ending chips and salsa and margaritas. Blast Riot Girls and rap, smoke a cigarette while I take out the trash. Netflix and chill by myself, lie to my husband about it later. Take shits with the door open and read Murakami and Morgan Parker. Balance a plate of not yet melty brie on my belly, eat the whole thing. Am beautiful for no one, concede only when the school day is done. Be pretty fun to try all of those things in one day. The title of this next poem is a play on Walt Whitman's poem, I Sing the Body Electric. I sing the body elastic, stretching back and forth like dough in slow motion. Here, a C-section smile made cyclops by the flattened belly button. There, ripples in the skin like sand ruffling in a desert wind. My body is winding around time, a moving staircase that carries me full of brain and heart through liminal terrains. The mole on my chin, a mark asymmetric. The fold of an ear's helix, a closed envelope, unread and undelivered. I am like a great Picasso painting, squared and cubed, or a Duchamp, nude and descending that same staircase, moving me unwilling through time, through space, unpaused. I want to slip on my high school dance body, lithe muscles like springs, wear my college skin, newly risque and high, hallucinating the body I will wear when I'm 60, The loosening of all that created other humans gave them milk. These are all my female forms, kinetic. Even my atoms, when I am gone, will continue to reverberate, lock on to other matter, still creating. This next one opens with an epigraph that comes from an art piece in the Glasgow Botanic Gardens. A dream. Our dreams are as bright as your lions, those golden beasts in tapestries of thought. Ruth Barker. Child, you wake and recount your dream. It is night and we are in a skiff, drifting toward the shore of a small island. Hands like plants stretch up and out of the grass, fingers like thin branches clawing at the air. Some are clutching cut gemstones, facets catching both the first light of sunrise and the eyes of crows. They swoop and dive, wanting something shiny for their curios, but the hands grasp their gems tightly. Even when a bird finally clasps one in its beak, it struggles to keep hold, so the stone is dropping down to earth. Oh, I lost my place. Tumbling over the open palms until one can snatch it again. More crows dive and fingernails poke them in the eyes. I don't know what this dream means, but I know that it's like seeing through antique glass, warped and bubbled and framed in brass. Your eyes close tight, but your little voice still babbles. What night-slick parables will you utter next? Syllables spinning from the spindle of your sleepy tongue. Animals. Spring is roadkill season. Crows gathering in the street for lunch. The shadow of a coyote hunched against Pueblo wall, legs limping down the slight slope of an arroyo. I often forget about animals until I'm confronted by their bodies. In Brooklyn, a dead kitten guarded by her clan till I called sanitation, neighbors looking the other direction. On a Saturday morning in winter, the lone Staten Island possum loping across a snowy field like an Arctic armadillo or a giant rat, plausible in the forgotten burrow. The trotting fox in Fort Collins, the kind that I imagine curtsies, wears pillbox caps with hat pins, fans a cape of auburn fur behind her, storybook eyes slick with awareness. All of the bears, non-storybook, that I have survived in campsites and on hikes. No porridge, no chairs or beds, just my ill-fitting bravery too big for my small and eatable body. I often forget that I am one too, a not-so-wild animal on the move. I growl, prowl grocery store aisles, rub my hands across my hairy legs and mate on early morning Sundays. As I mentioned at the beginning of this reading, before I moved to Santa Fe, I lived in Brooklyn. And even though I love Santa Fe more, every once in a while I miss the East Coast. So this poem is called I Miss New York. What I wouldn't give for a stranger on the street to call me a bitch again. Or for the acrid whiff of cat piss at the entrance of every bodega. My absence of eye contact is a skill only useful for subway riding and not at all useful in my car. The tourists in those double-decker buses and their gawking at my big city life. Orthodox women stopping to ask me if I'm Jewish during mitzvah campaigns. I looked just like those women with my bangs and black wool coat, strolling with a baby in a city mini down Eastern Parkway. On the first few cold and rainy days, the musty smell of wool and mothballs emanating from the coats of those I sardined against in the train. The loud clacking of the wheels along the track, lights flickering on and off, blips of impossibly placed graffiti. The historic crumbling buildings, some, like the Bedford Union Armory, lucky enough to have scaffolding for repairs to the facades. All of the peeling paint and mice and stoops, the absurd headlines of the daily news. Clown runs for president. God isn't fixing this. The next poem I'll read is my book's title poem. mainly because it deals with my move from the East Coast to the Southwest, and it opens with an epigraph. High desert. Still, everything that is singular has a name. Stone, song, trembling, waste, and snow. Larry Levis. This includes the single-legged crow hopping across the road and down the dry arroyo. Aspen leaves rattle and clack while bumblebees zigzag a maze of lavender. Today, I name this place home, though it is so unlike my last one. No neon bodega glow or rush hour foot traffic, no train rumble and stink rising from grates in the street, but a Pueblo-made city, bloom stuffed in an effigy and burned annually. Pinon and hatch chilies sold on the side of the road, chamisa burning gold. All of the singular names I marble in my mouth become a new kind of tongue. When I first moved to Santa Fe, I was really lucky to get to take some of the free seminars that Tony Hoagland, a great poet, was offering to the people of Santa Fe. And so I got really involved with him, his writing, would go to his readings, but unfortunately he passed away in 2018. So this next poem is for Tony. Some spell. In the fall, there is so much beautiful death. The wind's breath grows cold, and I think of the old poet, his bones sharp after treatment, his bald head covered to hide what no one is supposed to know. Aspen leaves fall like yellow confetti, but we are not celebrating. I imagine him nevertheless spry over letters, his last manuscript. I want to reach into the scenery of this city and unfold the mountain's origami, heal roadkill like a backwoods witch. I want to place my hands on his chest and mutter some spell, any words I can muster to make him well, though I'm sure he would tell me in true professor fashion, the rhythm of your line needs more syllables. Try again. I am going to follow that poem with one that was written in one of Tony's workshops. The exercise he gave us was to write a piece modeled after Philip Larkin's poem, Water, which begins with the lines, "If I were called in to construct a religion." Color. If I were called in to construct a religion, it would be a cult of color, each temple a home to a different hue. My temple would be blue, a bright teal like the iridescent shimmer of a mallard's neck, or a polished turquoise, the stone-veined black. We would pray to Iris, goddess of all colors, made-up colors too. The crayon they call macaroni and cheese, and blurple, a mix of purple and blue. We would baptize in deep vats of dye like Easter eggs, hang crystals in windows to scatter rainbows like stained glass, take communion, blackberry Malbec, and an ochre Eucharist. So I know that some of you at Santa Fe Community College remember, if you were around, the active shooter drill that we had. I think it was the second of its kind in how realistic it was done. And we had some students who were smeared with fake blood lining the hallways and an actual actor going around and firing blanks. At that same time, I was also teaching a night class at the University of New Mexico at their Los Alamos satellite campus. And after one of our classes, 2 of my students were shot and one of them killed. So these next 2 poems were written in the haze of those gun-related incidents. Run, hide, fight. Active shooter drill at the community college. Culinary students smothered in fake blood line the hallways to your office. An actor runs by yelling, firing blank shots. Over here, 2 students talking about hunting, making elk jerky. Note their access to guns. Note your own childhood access to guns. 2 weeks later, both are shot. R survives, Cameron dies. Cameron was your best student. See again the dead deer in your childhood backyard. Eyes wet, cut out tongue longer than you thought it would be. Dad's hand inside her sliced open abdomen. The unhidden gun in the back waistband of a Crown Heights neighbor, the front of your building shot up during a quick bodega run. Your old neighbors in Philly, murder-suicide, bodies on the other side of your apartment wall, the one your baby's crib was up against. Note the lack of windows in your current classroom, the nearest exits, the lack of makeshift weapons, just chairs and pencils. Note a student's anger at a bad grade, another student's grim silence. Watch the run, hide, fight video at work. Remember when Homeland Security was a non-existent department of government. Remember when your job didn't require students to play dead. The deer opens her mouth wide, is trying to tell you something. See the stump where her tongue once was. Wonder if a human shot in the head looks that alive just after death. Roadside memorials. It's winter, and in Santa Fe, people in trucks pull over to decorate roadside memorials. Christmas lights and plastic wreaths, sacred candles and figurines. It seems too festive for death, but I can understand the impulse to visit the place of passing. The spot where loved ones took their last sideways glance at speeding SUVs, where their ghosts peeled away from their bodies. There are too many of these vigils, and I'm daily reminded of my student, just 18, randomly shot in the head while driving. I wonder if his street-side memorial has Christmas lights. I wonder if his ghost hovers above those nearby snowy mountains, watching cars go by like insect exoskeletons. At night, a string of lights that just for him light up like fireflies. To wrap up, the last handful of poems I'll read are centos. Centos were traditionally 100 lines long, but lucky for all of us, I did not stick to that old rule. They also take all of their language from other sources, usually literary sources. So I have a whole series of these woven throughout my book. Most of them take their lines from novels and short stories, and one from movies. This first one takes all of its language from David Mitchell's novel, Ghostwritten. A question of wholeness. Paths forked off and forked off some more. I followed the monk through a maze of cloisters. We came to a quiet place, a grave. The milky turquoise vow of silence hung white in the twilight. I passed through a great doorway and stood in a network of tunnels. The music of dulcimers lit the path. Holy mountain, I feel like I've climbed out of a dark box and into quasars. There are so many cities in every single city. Sometimes language can't even read the music of meaning, the me that lives in me. I'm this person, I'm that person, I'm that person too. Tiny life form of star compost, full of the sun and the moon. And these last two I'll read tonight take all of their language from the Tom Robbins novel, Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. The enemy. The enemy is the tyranny of the dull mind and a typewriter of birds banging out sonnets in the dogwood buds. No, not those crows that just haikued by, but the eyes closed tight inside the pale blue beehive of Dakota sky, waves of grasses whispering, and there was the lake, laking. This sentence is made of yak wool, sunlight and plums, ice, and all a book contains is sentences. When poor Jack Kerouac heard about this, he got drunk for a week. Many small streams empty into these pages. I never promised you the Potomac. And this is the last one I'll read. Like I said, it also takes all of its lines from Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. History. The first amoeba that ever lived is still alive. It weeps for the decline of poets, tumbleweed, the peyote wagon, the distant buttes and canyons, the sky full of blades grinning like piranha in their cases. The mastodons are all gone. So are the Amazons. Timbuktu is now a roadside zoo so grand and giant and elegant that your heart squeezed out eternity's toothpaste. So early, the bluebirds hadn't brushed their teeth yet. History isn't ever going to end, and history is ending every second. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. I'm just struck by so many of these pieces. Thank you so much for reading.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
At this point, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or if you want to put them in the chat, you can do that as well. I'll kick off with a question, if that's okay. I'm wondering if you could talk about your process for writing the centos. It's centos? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
They are so intriguing to me and such interesting words reveal themselves. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So after my first book, An Unwalled City, came out, I went through a period of dormancy that was fairly terrifying. And I wondered, have I said everything I need to say? Have I written all the poems? And I had just read this book by Simone Munch called Wolf Centos. And it was an entire collection of centos from all different literary people. And they were beautiful and interesting and strange. And at the time, I was reading a lot, and that helped. I was starting to underline, any phrase, any language that was catching my attention as I was just reading for fun, and decided after reading Even Cowgirls Get the Blues that I would give it a shot and see if I could make some centos. And so it was fairly tedious, but I combed through the entire novel, typed up everything I had underlined in a document, and then used it kind of like a puzzle. I just kind of took sections and puzzled them together. I did, to be realistic, have to go back to the book and find other things like connector phrases. Generally, the rule is that you need, 3 or more words in a language chunk or language packet in order for it to really count. And so I was kind of combing through and finding those sections to link together. After I did that, then it just sort of became a habit. And some of my favorite authors include Murakami and David Mitchell, Angela Carter. I didn't read any of those poems from her short story tonight, The Bloody Chamber, but I was just very inspired and sort of found my way back into writing my own poems by sort of speaking first through the voice of others. So it kind of got me back on track, and all that reading and puzzling together writing then pushed me right back into generating more work, which was a huge relief.
Wow, that's complicated and beautiful. The outcome from all of that work is just amazing. So Susan Griego is asking if you would read her favorite, Almost Dying.
Oh, yes. Hi, Susan. How are you? Let me find it in the book. You'd think after all of the editing you have to do before a book comes out, I would remember which section it appears in. That's funny.
She says it's page 41.
Oh, bless you. I was just going to stare at the table of contents for like. Almost dying. Almost dying in childbirth was not what I expected. I had always envisioned a bear attack, me punching the bear in its wet triangle of a nose in self-defense, or throwing my body in front of some bullets headed toward some innocent victims, trying to die a martyr or a gunlit hero. But in a postpartum hemorrhage, I heard a scream not my own, repeating from my twisting mouth like a recording. From above my own body, I watched a swarm of doctors, hands tearing out clots. The dying began, and instead of fighting it with pluck and gusto, the way I had always imagined I would, my traitor body kept giving in to death's sleep, the little lights swirling in a quiet death snow. I felt myself slip away a few times, lost myself beneath the calm surface of death's lake-like smoothness.
Wow. Thank you for reading that. Thank you for recommending it, Susan. And Tina says, love the poem about Tony Hogland and the one about animals in the different places you've lived.
Hi, Tina. It's good to see you or hear from you. Yeah, my first book is mostly poems from Arizona and my experience growing up there. And as a child, I always thought it was the most normal thing to grow up there. And then when I started traveling and moving around, I realized, no, it's quite unique. I feel the same thing actually about Santa Fe. It's very different flavor, but it's very unique to live here compared to other places.
I think your contrast of Santa Fe and Brooklyn is really interesting. And since I haven't spent more than a couple days in Brooklyn, I'm intrigued by how you juxtapose those two places in this work. So
They're basically opposites in
yeah,
every
it seems like it.
You know, Santa Fe is the smallest place I've ever lived. I grew up in the Phoenix area in Tempe, Arizona, and then lived in Philadelphia for about 5 years, moved to Brooklyn, lived there for about 5 years, and I've been in Santa Fe now for over 6. And yeah, even though this is the smallest place I've ever lived, I think I have fallen in love with it, and I've already sort of planned out my retirement here. I'm not planning on leaving if I don't have to, that's for sure.
Great. Then we'll have more poems from here, I'm hoping.
I hope so too. Yeah.
And you have lots and lots of cheers and great comments. I'll send you as a file once the
Oh.
Zoom has ended. Anyone else, please feel free to turn your camera on or unmic yourself and ask a question or talk to Genevieve.
I'll go. I just wanted to say it was awesome. Like your poems were really raw and rich. The words were definitely unique. I second with Val in that the centos was different. And I also am like a fellow writer, and so I've been very like stuck. And so it was awesome to hear how you worked through all that and were able to write another book. And it's one of the things that I really want to do soon. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, I will say some things that have gotten me through the tough times. Louise Gluck, who just passed away a few days ago, has an essay. I don't know if I can recall the name of it now, which bums me out. But in it, she admits to going through periods of dormancy. And she says, I don't mean that I write badly. I mean that I don't write at all, anything. And for her to say that and for how prolific she was kind of astounding to me. So that was one of the things that I kept in mind during, the times where I didn't feel like poems were just coming to me. The other thing is just reading a lot. Every time I start to read, especially if I just pick up a book of poetry, I'll probably get like 2/3 of the way through, and then something is triggered and a poem will come out, or at least a partial poem. Yeah. And I made a habit of just anything that comes to mind, a word, a phrase, literally anything. I have a notes section in my phone and I just plug it in there. I call it my raw poetic material. And if I feel like writing and I don't have anything in that moment coming to me, I'll return to it. And so I'll work on those poems, and that will actually give me stuff that's already waiting to be written. So.
Really cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome.
Anything else from the audience? Well, thank you, Genevieve, and congratulations on your book. Again, we have it in the library. It's checked out to me at the moment. I will return it, though, tomorrow morning, very early. So it's in the new book section if you want to check it out, or you can buy a copy. They're available on Amazon. And do you have a preferred place that people buy it, Genevieve?
It is, I will say, better to buy it from the press. So it's FlowerSong Press. They are a small press out of Texas. They publish mostly Latinx writers, and they could use all the support you could give them. So I would say first and foremost, order from them, but it is available on Amazon. So
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. Thank you for sharing your work and your life with us. This is just beautiful. Thank you.
Val, thank you.